you. Okay. Hi. We are here with Thaddeus and Wendelin, and you are in Noir and Fantasy. If that is where you wanted to be, you're in the right place. If it is not where you wanted to be, stay around. I think it's going to be fun anyway. Just some housekeeping. Please put all of your Q&A questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. Y'all can use the chat to talk amongst yourselves out there, but if you would put questions in the Q&A. We've been asked to hold the questions till the end. So at about 10 minutes to the end of the session, we'll pop back in and give you guys the questions. Oops. Okay. So without further ado, please remember to follow our code of conduct. I do have the power to remove people who do not follow the code of conduct. Also, do not ask questions anonymously. That'll automatically get your question thrown out, no matter how great it might be. In order for security to work, we need to know who you are. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Wendelin, and you all have a great set of questions, a set of times. Thank you. I'm going to skip.
Oh, we have all these. Well, hopefully we'll have at least another panelist join us, but in the meantime, we'll just have to make do. I'm your moderator today, Wendelin Gray, and I am a self-published author that I mainly focus on Asian-themed horror fantasy blends long form. And I've worked for at least a decade at an Asian arts organization here in Pittsburgh, and programming and outreach for cultural outreach for the community, as well as other Asian arts organizations locally. So Thaddeus, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name is Thaddeus Howze. I am a speculative fiction author and a journalist and pundit and annoyance to people who don't like answers. I spend the bulk of my time writing science fiction of pretty much every genre, so I don't have a preference, although I do have my own supernatural paranormal adventure character, Clifford Ingram. You can find me pretty much anywhere. If you're looking for science fiction, you're looking for answers, I write on Quora, I write on the Science Fiction Fantasy Stack Exchange. I'm pretty much all over the internet. All you have to do is ask, literally.
Okay, Korea Black, are you ready to go? I'm glad to see that you made it.
Still experiencing technical difficulties.
Okay, we
Please
still don't have any
stand by.
audio, video, or anything. Well, once we do, we'll get the lowdown on what he's up to and who we got on the panel here. So I thought that we would start talking about our projects that actually have noir elements before we get into comparing it to what the classical noir was or different things that we wanted to do. Let's see, is he ready? Not quite.
You're muted, brother. Just unmute yourself. We can see you. Well, I say we push on, brother will catch up.
Okay. Did you want to start then on what your noir project is that you're currently working on or have had?
Oh, there we go. He's unmuted. Now he's almost ready to speak. Yes.
You want to let him go?
Anyway, my name is Thaddeus Howze. I write a paranormal investigator named Clifford Ingram. Clifford Ingram is a quintessential paranormal investigator in that he is always someplace he's not supposed to be, when he's not supposed to be there, doing things he's not supposed to be doing. He gets paid to do this stuff, so he doesn't mind. The shtick that I use for him is that in his world, magic is real. It's not supposed to be talked about. People are not supposed to know about it because in my world, magic is also sentient. The more people that use it, the more dangerous it becomes, the more it invades our world. So his job is to investigate magic and then replace it with things that are not magical. So if you found a magical book in your attic because of your ancestors were magicians or sorcerers and you started using it, but you didn't know how, and you made something bad happen, he would show up, smash the beastie, collect your book, and take it away. It's for your own good. It's not he's not happy about it. He's probably not going to enjoy cleaning up your mess, but he gets paid for this because the more people that use magic, the more dangerous the world becomes. And so his goal is basically a challenge to fight against forces that are unstoppable. They are unstoppable. People will continue to use magic because every time they see it, they want to use it. So his is a thankless job that he's really good at, and usually only small cities are destroyed after he visits.
So is this set in the real world, or is it in a
it's set in a modern time period. It's not set in the past. So whenever you read a Clifford Ingram story, it's generally set in today. Now, I do have a couple of stories where I go back and talk about his parents, who were also paranormal investigators, who were renowned paranormal investigators, who cut corners, and they were pretty much, do whatever it takes to get the job done kind of people. And that's dangerous in a world where magic is real, because if you cut a corner today, 10 years from now, it could be a real problem. And for Clifford, much of his early career is discovering that his parents were not perfect like he believed. He believed they were perfect people, that they always got the job done. And he's discovering as he adventures that there's more history there than he knows. And he's not usually very pleased about it.
Okay. Priya, are you ready to speak yet? Need to do your introduction? Looks frozen.
Yeah, I think he's struggling.
All right. We'll try the next round here. My project is the Lucky Cat series, which is what my little plush here is symbolizing. I'm actually cosplaying the character that I'm going to be reading about tonight. It's a 4-book series at this point, and it is set in a futuristic society, roughly 2070 through like 2140, global. So what I did with it is I went more for more of a dystopian 1984-ish kind of exploration of noir. And it basically features this family, 3 generations of the family, and that are dealing with this dystopian society that arises. It's 3 super states after World War III, and they get resettled, and there's all kinds of intrigue. But the element that I have that's mostly the only fantasy element in it is the Lucky Cat statue that is the heirloom that the original, the first book in the series, the character Kumori Ando has as a memento from her family from before the war and when they lived in the old country, and how that whole secret unravels as she gets drawn into the political battle in the background. So that's the short for her.
Is it a political story, or is it a?
It's more like political satire. My background, right now I study East Asia and East Asian language, but my formal training back in the day was Russian language and literature, and with some emphasis on like the Stalinist purges and things like that, which after I graduated, I switched regions because I started working with a different immigrant population. But I've also looked at these kind of societies throughout the 20th century. And so the themes that I'm looking for are like noirish type of exploration. And also it ends up kind of pulling in other genres of, these very predatory states and the murder of citizens by it, and different things like that. It's a very heavy theme, but I do have a lot of more goofy elements like the cat and what the cat is connected to, because there's a whole great big secret behind that. So.
Okay. And someone did ask us a question. They said, "What's the difference between noir and crime? Is it nuanced?"
Oh, do we want to do a definition of noir, classic noir, in the that kind of thing?
We probably should, because if you don't, what people will assume is that it's purely a crime-based thing, and it has some elements of crime in it. Usually, crime is prevalent in noir fiction. If you are reading a noir fiction, especially the classic stuff with the gumshoes, with the old detectives who were either private detectives or police detectives who didn't always travel the straight and narrow. These guys were usually involved in some kind of crime, which led to them discovering that not only was the crime more nuanced than they believed, but the people who came to them for help were probably not always telling the truth. And that's a part about noir I enjoy the most, was that when you meet your new characters, when you meet everybody, nobody's telling you the truth. So half of your job is to figure out what's really happening, who's really lying, and how much of the betrayal that's going to happen, because your character gets betrayed. He almost always does. when does that betrayal happen, and how does that character handle it? So Noir is about the dark. It's a dark world where no one's trustworthy, nothing works, people are rude and cruel, and even your hero ain't really all that tidy. She is maybe disgraced, maybe not as, they're not like heroes of many genres where the noir hero he's almost as shattered as the world he lives in. He just happens to maintain a tiny bit more integrity than the people around him. He either keeps his word or he gets his revenge. I mean, some of these guys are really kind of bloody. So, I mean, you have to really, it's a dark genre. You have to really embrace it. You cannot go in there thinking, oh, this is going to be like Superman. Oh, no. Oh, no, none of that. No, morality is so gray. It's very different. I love it, though, personally.
Yeah, and after I wrote my first book in the series, which is the most noirish of the 4 installments, I actually decided to do a deep dive into the history of noir. So it actually has roots in Victorian England, like horror, and it's always set in urban environments. It was really big in the 20s and 30s throughout the world because that was a time of corruption. So it has to do with this corruption, this political corruption, police corruption, medical corruption is another big theme, and things like that. So it's always sort of, and a lot of times it isn't supernatural. They don't have those kind of elements. You have more of a controlled supernatural, but it depends on what angle you take. Because I know Paul Meehan had a great series that I went through and looked at, and I was very surprised at some of his things that he added to it. But I wanted to, since the idea of like the antihero comes up in this discussion, I wanted to mention that my research, it comes up, it encompasses a range of figures, the central figures. It's not always a private investigator or a cop. Sometimes they say it's a veteran. Sometimes it's a plainclothes policeman, aging boxer, hapless grifter, law-abiding citizen turned to a life of crime, and simply a victim of circumstance was on the list. My story starts with the latter, the simply a victim of circumstance, the office lady who's isolated in this weird dystopian place with only her little cat statue to keep her company because they're not allowed to have pets. And she's totally the innocent and has no idea what's really happening and gets pulled into this crazy world of, all this intrigue and all this fighting against the superstate, and her family history is really, really weird and evil. So it kind of like gets into that from that angle, but it is actually really interesting whenever you do a formal study of it, the types of things that the range is a little broader, I think, than most people assume.
Right.
So I'm coming at it from the slightly different direction of like redeeming the cat lady and turning her into like this noir figure.
It's, what I like though. So for example, I don't know how many of you are role-playing gamers. So there was a game called Call of Cthulhu. And Call of Cthulhu was that perfect fusion of noir and the supernatural. Because for the most part, your adventurers were pretty ordinary people. Scholars, doctors, ex-vets, psychiatric home, people. I mean, it's really very interesting collection of fairly normal folk. And what they usually then encounter is something so bizarre, so strange, so far beyond the pale that it basically alters their psyche and in some cases drives them mad as they investigate. And what made Call of Cthulhu very popular was the fact that as a player, you don't expect to survive. It's one of the few games where as a player, you live, you adventure, and then at some point in the story, you're gonna die. You are. And so your point is, how do I die with style? How do I die furthering the plot? How do I die making it so that the story gets out? Because very often the story is usually about some person who survives the adventure and is now telling you the story. That's how Cthulhu stories are written. They're written in the perspective of, I survived. I'm in a madhouse. I'm completely insane, but I made it. So that's one of those things that fuse that noir essence with supernatural, or in this case, cosmic horror based themes. And it did it really well. So I definitely want to, I've been noticing people are listing their favorites. So if you have a favorite supernatural genre story, by all means, share it with us, because I'll take that list and add it to my to be read list. Over to you, Wendell.
Korea, do we have you yet? Are you able to speak and hear? Doesn't look like it. All right. What was I going to say? Oh, Paul Meehan has some really interesting books where he goes back to the whole history of it. And he has these genre blends, like what he calls tech noir, and then the other one is horror noir, and he talks about like the different examples of it. Now, I hadn't seen a lot of these old movies, and I hadn't really read a lot of that. I kind of went intuitively from what I knew about noir in general, and just other readings that might have been influenced by those original ones, and different movies that, of course, noir is very big because there's so much corruption in the world in the 20th and 21st century. It's gotten worse. It certainly hasn't been better. So I think that it has a lot more relevance now. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that he put the Godzilla films in the tech noir category because of the concern about technology being evil.
Right.
Now that matters to me because the Lucky Cat series features kaiju. So yeah, I've got these little cat statues. They get really big. So yeah, but I was really shocked. My misconception of it, I guess I really only understood a narrow band of what noir was. But whenever I read that, and I thought, well, I guess I'm really right on the right track regardless.
So somebody says, but beyond your own writing, what do you consider the best noir stories? My favorite. Okay, so I have a love and hate relationship for a character that exists in two places at one time. Harry Dresden, the Harry Dresden stories. I love Harry Dresden, but he's also appears as a character called John Constantine in the DC universe. They're really the same character. I know they look different, but they really are the same person. Both of them are rude, problematic, challenging, dealing with a supernatural world that nobody really knows about and doesn't really understand. And yet, I find Harry Dresden so much more approachable as a character than I do John Constantine, who is incredibly popular. There are people who love John Constantine. I cannot stand John Constantine. I hate the Rumple detective. No, I know you Columbo fans are out there loving him, but please put on some clothes, brush your hair, look civilized. John Constantine always looks rumpled. He always looks crazy. And he always has enemies that loathe him and want to burn him and everybody he knows. And I guess that's part of the charm of the character. I just don't enjoy it. I feel like anybody who hangs out with John Constantine pretty much is asking to get killed because they do get killed. And his noir is very dark. It is very dangerous. It is unpleasant in that he sacrifices people for his agendas. And I think that's just not the way to do it. So I have an issue with that. Harry Dresden has taken the other perspective. He tends to sacrifice himself. Yes, people die. Yes, some of his friends die, but he puts himself on the block rather than other people. And that makes him, in my mind, a little bit more redeemable. So I enjoy the Harry Dresden stories much better. And I haven't read the last two books, but that's only because my collection of books is growing so fast, I can never get ahead of him. But I have enjoyed the first five. And so I think there's seven now, and I haven't seen the last two, but I know they're going to be good. I'll just get around to it eventually.
Well, I come into this from the anime side and also from the film side because we had a film festival that the Asian Arts Organization that I worked for was involved with. And so I know more film examples from overseas. So some of the different ones that used noir was like Golgo 13.
Yes, I know that one.
Have you seen that one? Heard that one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the most important, probably, I think it was the longest running manga. They have had tons of films and tons of anime based on this. And it's very, very harsh, hard noir, where the main character is this assassin that they spring from jail, who is actually, his Japanese heritage actually matters in this particular story. And he basically manages to figure out a way to kill somebody that he's assigned to kill one shot by the end of that whole episode. Every episode's like this. And it just kind of, the darkness between who is and who isn't the good players in the world, because, the Americans were the ones who let him out because they found his skills useful, but then you see how morally gray they are. And I thought it was really fascinating. And then on the horror side of it, I liked Gilgamesh, which is sort of like, it's after a terrorist attack and the world has been put under some kind of strange dome that has like almost an EMP style sort of effect on the world. And there's these kids that were in this experiment that have all this power, this very strange power, and it all ties back into the old Gilgamesh myth. But I think that one has some really interesting noir mixing of the horror angle, and then also the terrorism. Anything that would would deal with terrorism apparently also falls under some of this tech noir.
Yeah, tech noir, right? And then, and if you're going to talk about tech noir, then you talk about yeah. See, someone said there's 17 Dresden's books, and the last one's better on. Yeah, so I've fallen off. I think I read the first 5, and I was like, okay, I'm now falling too far behind, and so eventually I'll get there. I'll get there. And I have friends who have mixed feelings about it, so that's one of the issues. If that's the case, then you get to look at things like Akira. Akira becomes tech noir then, because
Yeah,
the whole nature, yeah, the whole nature of that story is built around a technology that someone was creating, whose goal was to harness psychic power so they can use it to, replace nuclear weapons. Well, that goes horribly, 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 horribly wrong. And I figure if you got laser satellites, you don't need psychic powers. I have laser satellites. I don't need psychic powers. I'll just make that whole town go away. But for some reason, they decided they needed something sneakier, and so technology creates this new capacity, and it goes awful in every way. So yeah, there is tech noir that is very popular, very capable, very interesting. I love Akira. It's my favorite. It's really slow in the beginning, but it evolves and it becomes just one great big shit show. Anyway, I wish our brother could come back. What else we got? We got no new questions. So what else are we gonna do?
Well, we can talk more about some films. Would like Die Hard, do you think, fall into the noir? I mean, I didn't think of it back then, but it might very well. And I know Blade Runner probably does.
Blade Runner, Blade Runner by definition is noir. Our goal is to find people who don't want to be found for reasons we don't want to know, to discover they're not people. Yes, except that they are people. That's when noir is good, it asks good questions. So in the case of Blade Runner, the good question is whether the people who were created through the replicant process are people. Are they people? They look like people. They sound like people. They act like people, except under certain conditions. Are they people enough to replace people? Yeah, I think that's what people are worried about, which is why it works. Because if they look so much like us and they sound so much like us, what's the difference between us and them? And that moral gray area that's where the story lies. So yeah, that's a tech noir kind of thing. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, someone mentioned. The whole story is a detective story. And I think it's probably one of my favorites because it pretty much makes fun of all of it. It makes fun of the genre. It makes fun of the characters. It makes fun of the very nature of toons and how toons we're living, we live in a world with toons. What do you do when you live in a world with creatures who are not us and yet want to hang out with us and be with us, and we created them, yet they now live independently of us? Yeah, there's a whole lot of vagary happening there. That's literally the meat of noir, of, how vague can we make stuff? How much parsing do you have to do to really understand what's happening? So in the case of corruption, Roger Rabbit is a tale of corruption and murder, and I love that. Even and again, are toons people? Maybe they could be people, but they definitely can be murdered, and that was the story there. So I love that story. It's one of my favorites.
So for more recent stuff, how about things like Stranger Things or Jessica Jones, fitting into the mad scientist medical corruption theme?
So in Jessica Jones, I can do that one because I like Jessica. Well, I like comics, and I know Jessica Jones from comics. So let's say that Jessica Jones definitely falls into it. She is a gumshoe. She is unlikable. She is very capable. She is superhuman, in fact. But her cases are so awful. And the one that was shown on Netflix, which was the Purple Man. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's the Purple Man, basically. He had the power to convince people of whatever he told them was real, and they would follow through with it no matter what. A terrifying enemy, terrifying. Kilgrave is so terrifying that it's barely able to be understood. And I write on Quora, so I had someone actually, what's the limitation of his power? He has to speak your language, or you have to speak his. So if you don't speak English, well, he can not say anything, and you could still be affected by him, but you have to interpret him. So if you can't interpret him, there's a limitation. And thank God he had one. I think in the comics, he's almost always played poorly. He's always written poorly. It's rare that someone takes the true dark aspect of his capacity to its natural, supernatural capacity, where he just has people walking off buildings because he said so, and he could do that. So I find him quite questionable. Now, a lot of people do like Jessica Jones. I wasn't one of them because I don't like the character. I mean, I know she was popular in the comics, et cetera, but I didn't like her. I did not find her responsible. I know being affected by Kilgrave's powers should alter people's psychology and maybe even damage them forever. But I feel like her not being a likable person was part of the genre, because very rarely are Noir characters lovable. Most people do not like them. I never liked them, and yet I enjoy them. You know, I enjoy their humanity. I think what I like about those characters is they're very human. When you read a lot of fiction, the heroes are so much beyond humanity that they become unreal. And what Jessica Jones lacked in likability, she makes up for in the fact that she feels very human. And I like that about her.
Yeah, I think that with what I did with my piece, adding it to the dystopian type of novel, puts it in a different light, so that the characters have a little bit more positive qualities. You can like them and root for them, but the situation leads to such morally ambiguous decisions that they have to make, because they're basically not good according to the law and according to the people in power. So they have to do some pretty shady things. But I wanted to get back to Stranger Things, and I didn't say I know a fair amount about it. That I would say that the experiment with the energy department on L sounds like the mad scientist kind of.
It is. Yeah. It is absolutely mad scientist. Is like, we're going to go and do something we know is bad. We're going to involve ourselves questionably in this because we're hoping to get wealthy and have power and technology, and then it goes horribly, horribly wrong. And I believe that's part of Noir too. Part of Noir, tech noir in that response, is that people will create a technology that they know is morally questionable and immediately decide that it should exist. No one ever says, I wonder, should we make this? No one ever does that. They just do it. And anybody that questions it either ends up a lunatic in the story, or they get erased before the story starts. You know, the one guy who was morally opposed had a terrible accident driving down a mountainside. Yeah, I bet it was a terrible accident. That's the nature of good tech noir, that it asks questions. It creates a circumstance that you have to wonder whether we should have ever been doing this in the first place. And I find that whenever I look at a story like that, I pretty much can know that it's going to be noir or noir-esque, because it's going to say this thing should be done because it should be done because someone will get rich from it. And that's the most important thing. Yikes. So I'm sorry, my cat is being bad. Get down.
Yeah.
I have a black cat, and it thinks that it rules the world.
Cats can do that, definitely. Yeah. Another good example from an older anime is called The Big O, and if you're really into more the classic style, especially with the mecha, the robots, but
Big O,
it's a very classic with the voiceover. And if I had realized it was just going to be the two of us talking, I would have brought more of my research on this. But I believe that one of the things that they said was a feature of the classic noir was amnesia, and in the Big O, they talk about how the whole city, that I believe is put under a dome. It's been a while.
Yes, it's under a dome, and nobody remembers anything about their lives, right?
They have no idea, but it's like this very 1940s kind of feel, and the main character is this kind of renegade cop, and they've got these weird things happening that sort of hint at this dark secret as to whatever happened before, and it's fascinating. I thought that was probably one of my
favorites. Big O is amazing. I love Big O, the negotiator. He doesn't have a name. He just gets a title. I am the negotiator.
He does the voiceover just like the old style. So.
Oh yeah, it's lovely. I think Big O is one of my favorite. It reminds me of that other one, Dark City, where it's a space. Well, I don't know. Should we reveal anything about Dark City? No, I refuse to, because Dark City, literally, if you haven't seen it, you must see it. You must see it. You must find it. It is one of those. It's quintessentially noir, and then at the very end it says, well, whatever you thought you were watching, it's not true. And I love that. I love it. So I'm not going to tell you anything about Dark City, because it is literally that good. It is the kind of thing that you just have to watch it. And once you're done with it, you're like, oh, mind blown. There it is.
Yeah.
It's all out there. So watch Dark City. It is absolutely great. Someone said Jurassic Park then falls under the tech noir. I agree.
Right.
I absolutely agree. Because the people in Jurassic Park literally don't care. And every movie they show you they don't care. It's about money. We will risk your lives, all of your lives, for a park that has been built by the lowest bidder. Come on, let's keep it real. Keep it real. Jurassic Park was made by the lowest bidder because every time it goes south, everybody gets in.
Yeah, and you get the kaiju angle on it because like the Godzilla connection with the dinosaur. So I mean, yeah, that definitely could work.
Yeah, it falls for me. It's someone said, how is Noir related to Fairyland?
Well, I think that in the description, yeah, they put that in there. If you probably can do more with fantasy elements in it. Now I do have my my Lucky Cat statues, and I have ball joint dolls that become active fantasy elements, horror elements in my story. I'm not sure. I think that they were looking more at maybe having like dwarves and elves mixed in, and maybe there are people who do that. Maybe some of our people who didn't show up on this maybe have examples. I don't know very many, but
well, I think that noir and fantasy are perfect together. My Clifford Ingram stories are literally detective stories with supernatural elements. I have exsanguinations that happen though there's no one in the room. Something drinks all the blood from people and leaves no trace. That's literally the kind of stuff that paranormal adventuring is made of. You know, I had one villain who could walk through mirrors. So he killed people through their mirror. How do you track this guy? I mean, the house is locked, the rooms are locked. It's a locked door mystery, but people still die and someone's got to figure it out. And so our hero has to challenge himself to figure out how people are dying in a place where there's nothing in a room but a mirror. And of course, the question is, well, can you kill people through mirrors? And see, as a supernatural adventurer, you're like, yeah, I don't know if it's possible, but it's a good way to bet because you have to start asking the ridiculous questions. When you remove everything that's possible, only the impossible is left. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes said that. I got it.
now,
So
are
go
these
ahead.
short stories or novels?
They well, I have a novella
Okay.
called Broken Glass, and that novella it features for most people their first taste of Clifford Ingram. And I wrote Clifford Ingram as a commentary on John Constantine. When I first started writing him, he was a commentary on John Constantine because everything that John Constantine does that's awful, Clifford Ingram doesn't do that. So Clifford Ingram is always dapper, he's always clean, he's crisp. He doesn't abandon his friends. He doesn't sacrifice them to dark gods for exploitation and opportunity. And he pisses off everyone that comes in front of him just because they want him to. They want him to sacrifice. It's like, you know, get the job done. Don't worry about the people. And his attitude is, no, the people are the reason I'm doing the job. If the people don't matter, then this job doesn't matter. So, you know, he's even in conflict with his bosses who want the supernatural menace stopped no matter what. And they complain about the way he does it. But generally he's effective, so they stay away from him. So when I first started writing him, he was just a bunch of little short stories. And then my wife said, you know what? You should write more of this. So I wrote my first Clifford Ingram novella, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And so since then, I've been working on several other longer than short stories, but shorter than novels, and I'll combine them together. And the people who read them really enjoy them. So I'm happy that Clifford makes people happy.
So we mostly would have to look for them in the short story format in wherever they were originally published.
Well, yeah, in the original format. And if you go online, like I said, you can buy Broken Glass as a Kindle novella. So you can get at least one fully published version available. And like I said, the other short stories have to be found. But, you know, look me up. I'll share them with you. They are fun stories.
Yeah, mine are all novels, so I don't have as much accessibility issues. But that's
right.
Do you have a list of the stories somewhere that's
I do.
Accessible for people to try to dig around for them?
Yep. So now someone mentions Victor LaValle's Ballad of Black Tom. And I think this is a good time to talk about that. Okay. So if you don't know Victor LaValle's Ballad of Black Tom, it is a commentary. That's why we talked about Cthulhu earlier, because I knew we would get here. So it's a commentary on H.P. Lovecraft's stories. And H.P. Lovecraft was a known cosmic horror writer. He was also a racist cosmic horror writer and very often did not look positively upon people of color. So some people of color, I won't mention any names, have written stories that take his Lovecraft's perspective and change them so that people of color either feature in the stories or are the protagonists of those stories. And the Ballad of Black Tom, which is about to become a TV series, I hear, has a main protagonist who is a person of color. He is an average person who's not average. He's your regular Joe. He's a hustler. He's somebody trying to get by. He's trying to make his way in the world. And his belief is that just because white people have all the power doesn't mean they really have all the power. So as he moves through the world, he starts to discover that power is relative and that there's levels of power, and that some levels of power are so terrifying and so frightening, they boggle the mind. And yet he continues to find the answers and push on. And I think it's going to be a great series when they decide to, because I know they're going to push more of it. But the first book of it, I bought, I read. As a matter of fact, I read it to my wife. My wife and I read it to each other because the chapters were fairly short, but they were very good. And so, we just took turns reading it to each other. And it ends up being a really great book in that he builds a nice series of events that eventually lead you back to the beginning and yet tell you a completely gripping story. It's really good, and it'll be great. It'll be great for television because we all know that Lovecraft Country, I don't know how many people have seen it, but it was out there, does the same thing. It takes Black protagonists, puts them in an H.P. Lovecraft story, and when they're done, it is H.P. Lovecraft, but it's not. And I think that's what I liked about it best. It was that we got to experience the horror aspects of H.P. Lovecraft without having to talk about his perspective at all. We just had a story, and it was well done, and I enjoyed it. And I recommend Lovecraft Country for anybody that wants to see H.P. Lovecraft stories, but don't want to experience what you might consider to be toxic racism. I personally don't have this problem. I've listened, matter of fact, you can find H.P. Lovecraft stuff on YouTube. There's a bunch of writers who just read it out loud. And some of it's really good when it's read that way. I mean, really good.
He has an archive too, where you can go and just read through all of his.
You can just read through all of his work. So it's very impressive. I really liked it. And these adaptations so far have proven to be wonderful adaptations. I've enjoyed The Ballad of Black Tom. I enjoyed Lovecraft Country. And though the book is a little different than the series on TV, I still think it was well done. And I enjoyed it immensely as far as how they wove these stories together so that you can see the story from a Black perspective. And I think that's the thing I liked best about it.
Well, that you bring up the race aspect of it. Let me also address some of the historical issues in noir with the femme fatale. In my research, they talked about how in the original wave of noir films, I believe things like Mildred Pierce, which Joan Crawford, I think, was in, a lot of times the femme fatale in these stories wasn't always somebody who was necessarily a criminal. A lot of times it was just women who wanted to do things that were not socially acceptable. In Mildred Pierce's situation, she wanted to become a baker and support her family, and that's what made her a bad person. So I guess maybe in some ways I'm deconstructing in my story, having my little weird cat lady, office lady who's very naive and doesn't have any idea really what's going on, that I'm kind of going the opposite way with it and sort of pulling her in, but maybe addressing some of those traditional classic tropes and approaching it in a different way, because it's very female dominated, the whole series. So
we have 9 questions and 10 minutes. Are vampires, werewolf stories noir? Only if there's intrepid adventurers trying to slash and slay those horrible monsters do they get to be noir. Otherwise, they mostly stay horror. Ironically, I was looking through my notes and I realized that, we were talking about this before the show started, that Van Helsing is a vampire hunter and by definition, noir. He is one of the first paranormal investigators. He's searching. He knows what he's looking for. He knows there are vampires in the world and he can't tell anybody about them because nobody believes in them, which means he doesn't get any support. So he is out there by himself, and that in and of itself makes him kind of noir. He's struggling alone in a terrifying experience surrounded by monsters, and he can ask no one for help because they don't believe him. So yeah, I'd say that vampire stories can be Noir. Werewolf stories, maybe. I guess it depends on how the werewolf, how the contagion is caught. I mean, if it's literally a contagion versus supernatural event, maybe it could have some tech noir aspects, but I couldn't say for certain. It says, what kind of, hold on, go ahead.
Oh, I would think that some of that would depend on the context. I mean, maybe you just have a werewolf who already exists and it's not really an issue. That if they were in a society that was, frightened of them, monsters in general, or where it was just a lot of corruption, and that sort of is like his secret side to his gumshoe ability, that he's also a werewolf. He could check things out as a werewolf that he couldn't or he could deal with people as a werewolf that he couldn't as a regular human. So
and it was done. It was done.
Yeah, it was
done. It was done in Fables. The big bad wolf is a detective.
Oh, okay.
So it was done. So yeah, you're right. You could have it. The big bad wolf in the comic series produced by DC or Vertigo was Fables. And the big bad wolf he is the enforcer, he is the investigator, he is the sheriff. And so yeah, you could technically do that. Here, the werewolf is the good guy. Good.
Well, people don't know if he's a werewolf, then that really
ugly. They don't know. But they know he's terrifying. They do know that. Yeah. It says, what sort of tropes and stories have been done to death that we never want to see?
Renegade cop and the cop stuff is I think is overdone to an incredible extent.
Cops are, but the reason that cops get overdone is because cops get paid to investigate things. If you're talking about investigation, literally, cops get paid to do that. Private investigators get to do
corruption,
and they're closest to it. So if you say, okay, I never want to see cops again, I'd be okay with that because there are plenty of other people in the world who could happen upon a horrible incident. Matter of fact, I look at whistleblowers, the people who discover something terrible in the world and say, I'm going to tell no matter what. That ends up being horrifying for them. And when we discover it, it's even more horrifying.
I think something like the old Nancy Drew, because Nancy Drew was kind of a busybody.
Yes.
That could work too. You could definitely make a case and turn that into something kind of interesting and dark and noirish.
I've never read Rivers of London, so I can't actually say. Have you?
No.
So many books, so little time. I'll have to put that. Wait a minute. Somebody said they wanted to answer that. Melissa?
Oh,
Melissa, you want to answer that? Because I've never read Rivers of London. Well, she might answer it, so we'll go on.
Okay.
It says, what are the relationships between noir and steampunk? Steampunk is a genre that can have noir elements.
It might be the same because of the roots of noir in the Victorian England. Now, whenever I did my research, there was a discussion about how because Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was considered noirish, because it has to do with these grimy urban environments where you've got the gaslight lampposts, and it's foggy and it's rainy, and there's this side of human evil in these urban environments. So I think that's where that maybe gets pulled into it. And the Jack the Ripper thing, that and a lot of it was serial killer stuff, which is why I don't know a lot of some of these, because I don't like that kind of stuff. I like a different angle. They're always killing all these women. I don't want that.
Yeah, who wants that, right? I don't know. I understand. So yeah, steampunk and noir technically share a period. That's how I'd look at it. From
and
like
maybe an attitude.
So 1890 to 1920, 1930. Yeah. That's a nice window for steampunk stories as well as noir stories. And if you can fuse the two of them together, you'll probably get something really tasty. Plus there's, tech noir, because steampunk is about technology. So you're going to get some tech noir in there. You probably have some medical horror if they've got prosthetics. You've got some psychological horror if they fight monsters. I mean, steampunk and noir, they kind of,
it's a good dovetail. It is.
They go together real nice if you can do it. Yeah. It says, what are some places you think noir has not reached, but you're excited to see it go? Melissa Tolliver would like to answer that question live. Melissa, turn on your mic. Join us. Or not. Okay.
Hey, before
she
it's too late here, we've
Sorry.
got a couple minutes.
There she is.
Yeah, I was not trying to answer. I punched the wrong button. I'm trying to move your questions out of your range so you don't have so many.
Oh,
So
okay.
sorry, going away now.
So someone says, could there be a highly moral character in an otherwise noir story?
I think
Of
I'm trying to
course.
do that with my story with the dystopian blend. Yeah, you'd have to check it and see whether you agree that that's the case. Because some of my otherwise, women who would be moral and normal and everything, they end up in these situations where they got to do some shady stuff, or there's some darker emotions that they have to delve into, and they have these dilemmas that they have to face. So they're kind of tainted by that, and they're a little uncertain. But yeah, they're not as dark and corrupt as the traditional noir antagonist.
I don't say that the two are mutually exclusive. I believe that you can have a moral character in a noir world. That road is rough. That is a rough road to hoe. And
Yeah, let's
I
see.
think Dresden does it. At least in the beginning, he started off very moral. He's very gray, but he's very moral in that he has a series of things he will and will not do, and we never see him deviate too much from that. And I feel like when you look at a character who is moral in an amoral world, that character's life is hard because they are talking about a thing that most people don't understand. Hey, morality, let's be good. Oh, why would I want to do that? There's no money in that. And so that puts them in a position to be like Harry. Well, you're getting by on an old Volkswagen and whatever you've got in your pocket at the times. This is that struggle. So I don't think that it's impossible to have a highly moral character in a otherwise corrupt world. I think that's a lot of good fiction
Um,
plays on that polarity.
my research has for the film versions. Now I've not seen either one of these, but the Victim of Circumstance was a film called DOA, and the
Yes.
law-abiding citizen lured into a life of crime was gun crazy. So there
Yes.
are those tropes out there. They're just not dominant. They usually like to go, like I said, with the cops more than
They're,
anybody.
they're hard to do. They're
Yeah.
hard to
Oh
do.
yeah. You really have to walk the line.
Someone said A.W. Axley, The Artifact Hunters is a steampunk noir story. So now when I'm done, I'll be downloading this whole list so I can get a piece of that. Someone asked, how do you structure a locked room story like that? Do I know the answer before I write it, or do I just write it and let it happen?
I always plan. It's too
You-
it's too much trouble to have to revise if you don't know what you're doing to start.
Right. With mystery novels, my experience so far, or mystery stories, has been so far that you pretty much have to know everybody who's in the story. You have to know where they're going to be, what their plot and where their part in the story is. And then you have to make it so that lots of people look like they could be guilty, but the person who's actually committed the crime, you usually meet them early in the story. You just didn't know they were the criminal. And you took them for granted, and thus you eliminate them because they don't appear to have the most motive. So you look at the guys with the most motive, and your adventure, of course, follows them because they make sense for them to. And eventually you scrape them off until you find that in the end, the person you thought was probably harmless tends to be the most dangerous person of them all. So yeah, I always have to plot and scheme. Occasionally I will let inspiration drive me, but when that happens, Lord help us all.
Well, we're winding down
I
here, and before
I
we go,
I hate to interrupt. I hate to
No,
interrupt.
we
This
have to
is
go. We
so
know.
fascinating, and I don't know about the audience, although from the chat I can tell we have just enjoyed this so much. Unfortunately, we do end in about a minute, I think.
Out a minute.
I wanted
Um,
to ask actually because I've got a reading tonight at 7. Thaddeus, are you reading this weekend?
I am not. I wish I was. If someone
Oh,
had,
okay.
I did not know we were reading. Otherwise, I would have.
Oh, all right. Well, I just want to make sure we get that plug in before the end here. So is there more that you wanted to say, Melissa?
no, I just wanted to thank you both. It was a stimulating, fascinating conversation. Thank you to the audience. Incredible chat. Great questions. And Thaddeus, thank you for keeping an eye on that. I think we answered everything we
Yeah,
need.
Yeah, we did.
So
We got everything.
go out and have fun. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
It was lovely to meet you, Wendelin.
Yeah, great. We even matched this.
I was looking at you've got the
Yeah, I
Japanese
have
and then
Japanese
the bamboo.
motif. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah.
I love it.
All right.
Thank you guys for
Yeah,
coming.
we'll
We
see you this
appreciate it.
weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. I'm going to end the
Good
meeting
night.
now.